Hi, it's Scott here, and this is my latest moment in time. I'm not quite sure what colour my eyes are, but that's going to become apparently important in the next few minutes. And I'm in the forest as usual, surrounded by my lovely favourite plant, which is ferns. Now, I'm going to do a video about ferns. I know it's not particularly businessy, but there's something about them that just completely captivates me. So I'll come back to that. Anyway, yesterday I posted a piece about arguing and how we can avoid it, or how we can change it, and how we can perhaps have better outcomes following an argument or during an argument. I've had some really good feedback. Thank you ever so much. And one piece in particular by an ex-neighbour of mine, actually, who moved away, a chap called Ben, came back and asked some really good questions about, what is an argument, etc. And I think we'll come back to that. But one of the things that Ben also mentioned is something that those of you who have been in my some of my development courses will know. I'm very interested in labelling, and Ben asked a question about labelling and suggested that it's an issue. He's absolutely right. So in this moment in time, I'm going to focus on labelling and give you some examples about from my experience, where I think we need to perhaps be more aware of the power of labelling. So one of the leading lights, certainly from the 1960s onwards, is a lady called Jane Elliott. Now, they called her Jane the Bitch Elliott because she had quite, how to put it, quite strong methodologies for teaching people what it was like to be discriminated against. Sorry, can you hear that barking? That's not a dog, that's a deer, that's a muntjac. And she did a very famous experiment, which is now repeated all through the last 50 years, where she, in the 1960s, she did some experiments with children. Now, these wouldn't be allowed today, which will become clear. And she would go into the class and say, okay, we're going to divide you into two groups, brown-eyed and blue-eyed. And I'm summarising here, but and we will basically be kind to the brown eyes, and be very rude and dictatorial towards the brown eyes. And even Jane was shocked at how the roles developed. So the brown eyes would become superior, they would become dominant, whilst the blue eyes would become subservient. And there was even cases where one of the children in the experiment ended up hitting one of the blue eyes because they were being dumb. So this little boy kicked the other little boy in the stomach. So what's that all about? Well, it's about, as I said earlier, it's about labelling, and the fact that labelling has a severe impact on our psyche. Now, what do I mean? Well, if you label somebody as bad, if you label somebody as difficult, if you label someone as weak, as stupid, it's not good for them, and I think that's obvious. But the thing that's less obvious is that they take on the labels. And that's why Jane did the work in the 60s, because this was in the middle of the race riots. This was when people were telling people with brown eyes, who just so happened to be black and Asian, that they are lesser humans, and that they are violent, that they are racist, that they are rapists, that they are, terrible human beings. And people take on those labels. Now, what does that say? Now, I know Jane has quite an abrasive technique, and I'll just put a little clip in here. But I think there's something in it, because every time she's done it, there has been a response. I mean, people have got into these groups, people have behaved as she would predict. And whilst I appreciate that it's more effective with kids, it's still an impact. It still has an impact. And I've played with this with some of the disc-based techniques for measuring, inverted commas, people's personalities, or talking to people about their preferences. And it's quite interesting, because one of the things you observe when you do a lot of these things is that people take on the colours, or the animal type, or the label that you give them. And this is the sort of daily male psychology, where, what animal do you like? That indicates that you are a strong, powerful individual, or this one indicates that you're a weak person who needs guidance or whatever. And although I know a lot of people, and some of my best friends work in this area, there's good anecdotal evidence that it can help people. I just have a worry about it. I think labelling needs to be thought a lot more about. It can even be transitory, because I remember I did a large exercise in a hall in a football stadium. It was in Reading, and I got them to go into corners depending on what football team they supported. And within seconds they were singing songs, they were hurling abuse. Now, it was good-natured, it didn't get aggressive, but they very quickly went into those teams, into those labels. And it was interesting because it was transitory. So they went straight back into lunch after that exercise, and they were all mingling and things. But then you just heard the occasional niggle about that Spurs fan or that Arsenal fan or that Reading fan. So I think there's something to it, and I would like to see companies think a lot more about it, and I'd like to see politicians understand it. I'd like to see the media understand it better, because it's like, a good example is Trump. Now, I'm sorry, I have no time for Trump, but the people who vote for Trump are a completely different kettle of fish. There's a reason why they vote for Trump, and if I label them, I had a discussion recently with someone, and she labelled Trump supporters as rednecks and racists. Now, that's a gross assumption. That may be true. I don't know. I've not done the research. However, if you label them as redneck racists, Jane Elliott's work suggests that they will behave as redneck racists. So I'd like us just to think about this. Just take a pause and think about what you do at work. Think about how you label other people. I mean, the workplace one's easy because you have these ridiculous performance reviews where people are put in forced rankings, and whilst that is thankfully diminishing in more enlightened companies, it's still there. And everybody knows it's a silly idea. It's like, if you do really well, you get a bonus. If you do really badly, you're on a performance improvement plan. If you're in the middle, you've done really well. And they come up to you, and unfortunately I've had to do this because I'm a former HR director. You go up to somebody and say, look, well done. We've done the performance review, and this year you've been average. It doesn't work. So let's have a think about labels. Let me know if you've anything that you've experienced, or if you don't agree with what I've said, let me know, because I think this is an area that we should be teaching in our schools. I think labelling is a really important issue in plain sight that we don't address enough. Thank you very much for listening. This is Scott MacArthur's Moments in Time.